Hi, I'm Laura.
I'm Diane.
And I'm Philippe.
Welcome to our Lymond book club. We are reading Queen's Play by Dorothy Dunnett. We're on part 1, chapters 3 and 4. Dee's going to lead us through these chapters, but we're going to start out with our initial impressions, and I want to hear from Dee and Philippe about how they managed to miss so many clues in the first couple chapters.
Oh my gosh. Well, Dunnett totally fooled me. That was hilarious. I went back and it was so funny because thinking after I finished the 4th chapter, I was like, all right, I have to go back and reread the 1st and 2nd chapters. I was completely convinced that it was Pater who climbed the mast and released the sails in that, like, it obviously wasn't. It was Thady Boy / Lymond. but I, for some reason, I when I read that again, when I read it the second time, I was like, wait a second, how did that happen?
So I asked you, like, what did you think of Thady Boy climbing the mast? But then
Yeah,
I was like, I'm gonna guess. How did they miss that?
Like, somehow my brain had just decided that, like, oh, this sleepy fat drunk guy isn't gonna climb the mast, so it was the other guy, even though she clearly said that it was him. Yeah. That was funny.
Yeah, I feel personally like I need to apologize for missing such an obvious thing. Like, here, all the watchers are, oh, he figured out the Andy Hunter plot. And then I let something like this just completely go over my head. And I'm a bit embarrassed, but it happened. I didn't figure it out.
I got complacent in my reading and was just like, oh, he's blonde, he's got to be Lymond. And I was just like not paying attention to, I wasn't paying attention to the clues. And
I will say, I was very confused in these 2 chapters. Towards the end of the 3rd chapter during the tennis match, I was like, why is Lymond being so stupid?
That is exactly when I was like, what the hell is going on here?
I was starting to question. And I was thinking,
exactly.
He must be doing this for a reason. There's got to be some good reason. Not at that point realizing that we were not actually paying attention to Lymond. We were paying attention to the real Lymond. So
yeah, that's exactly what happened to me too. I was like, there's no way he's missing all this. I was like, how can he possibly have, like, it's so obvious this is the real king, and like, how is he not responding? And then, oh, it's not Lymond.
And I was too busy trying to solve the mystery of where this right-heeled missing person was and what was happening there that I wasn't paying attention to the obvious mystery that was happening. So I missed this one.
I was wondering if I should cut it off after the 3rd chapter or the 2nd, but I feel like in the 3rd, you really start to get an inkling, like, if this is Lymond, he's really trying to piss off the king. What?
Yeah, he's like, what the hell's going on?
It does make me wonder about a couple of things. So the first thing I thought about after the reveal and after finishing these chapters today was, I wonder why she chose to reveal it so early. Like, she could have spread this out a little bit longer. And like, I think if that had happened, I probably would have realized eventually that I was wrong in my assumption. And second of all, like, she's such an expert at misdirection. I'm wondering, because this is an obvious direction, she wants you to think that it's a Lymond, but clearly putting clues that it's not in those first 2 chapters. If she was putting this misdirection so early in the book, what else is she misdirecting us from that might be happening behind the scenes? So,
well, I think that's part of why she does it. There's at least a couple reasons. One is to set the stage of almost no one is what they appear. And so she's priming you to look for what else isn't what it seems. But then also there are characters that may or may not mistake Lymond for Lymond in disguise. And I think that if you hadn't been tricked, you would find it unbelievable that other people can't figure out that that's not Lymond. But since it happened to you, you can understand how other people would be confused too.
That is a really good point.
Is this something that a lot of people make the same mistake on? You don't
I
know.
don't
I
want to spoil
mean,
too much.
it certainly makes characters seem like, I'm going to be reluctant to say like, oh, that character's an idiot because they haven't figured it out, since I didn't figure it out, you know? And so I'm guessing I'll have a lot more sympathy for characters who are fooled by this because I was fooled by this. Another, like, I kind of had this list of, because I mean, I went back and reread the first 2 chapters, obviously. And there was a couple things that I'm really, on that second read of the first 2 chapters, which I think it's okay to talk about that at the beginning, just the second read of the first 2 chapters, a couple of questions that I've come away from it with is, I'm still curious about who Pater is, if he actually is Oliamro's long-term servant or if he's come with Lymond. I don't think that was answered, or at least it wasn't answered to my satisfaction. I'm curious about that John, is it
Daubeny? John Stuart Daubeny.
I almost said aubergine, and I'm like, that's not right. Aubergine. And the guys who are with him, I'm sort of curious by them because they're not, there's not a lot of attention drawn to them, except that they seem kind of mean and like they're mocking Oliamro and Beatty and them, but they're mentioned again later, and like this idea that they smell a particular, like they have scent, and I'm wondering, is there a perfumer that's going to become part of this story, or is this and because they've come up more than once, even though they've barely been mentioned, I'm sort of curious about, like, are these particular courtiers that we're supposed to pay attention to? Do we need to?
I will say, I imagine that most of the French courtiers have a strong scent because that's the fashion of the time, this decadent court where the men are beautiful and made up and smell amazing.
Yeah, but it's like these particular guys got mentioned more than once with this one characteristic. And so
I think also part of the reason they are mentioned more than once is because Oliamro has been tricked into thinking they might be the ones who set up the fake king, because they saw him before and they were like laughing at him. So I think they're mentioned again to sort of plant that seed.
Right. So then my question, I think the other major question I came out of these early chapters with is, who the hell is Una, and why is she so, like, awful? I mean, like, that was just shitty. Like, that she basically set up Oliamro. I mean, he could have died. Like, she could have murdered him with this trick. And wow.
So I have 2 questions for you. One is, was she acting alone or did Mistress Boyle send her? And 2 is, what might her motivations have been?
I think the first one is answered. I think in the chapters that we read, there's a part where Boyle, Lady Boyle, Mistress Boyle, I forget.
Yeah.
She sort of says, "Oh, sorry for giving you that information." So
yeah, oops.
Guess I was wrong, but I don't think it's as clear and pat in that. I think obviously she
yeah.
wanted them to believe that for a very specific reason. I just don't know what the motivations would have been.
Right. And is it more complicated than that? Like, just because Boyle says, "Oh, I'm sorry for letting you know that," or something, that doesn't mean that Una wasn't the one who did it, who was behind the whole thing. So I'm a little bit reluctant to ascribe responsibility immediately, just because I feel like everyone's manipulating everybody else.
Yep.
I don't know. And as for motivation, I think one question comes down to what's going on with Ireland, and are Mistress Boyle and Una, are they somehow working for Ireland in a particular way? Is the whole Liam Rowe thing, is that what's going on there? Are they betraying someone. I don't know. Philippe, did you see any?
Not yet. Not that I can pick up on yet.
You have the one clue about Una storming out when
Yeah.
how Lymond was just there to see how the rich live at someone else's
Right.
house. So you know there's something going on, but
it feels like but it seems like that's like, if she's mad, it seems like she's got to be mad about something else. Like, because she made this very dramatic exit. And basically what they said was, oh, he's going to mooch off the king for a while and get a free vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I can see why that would be annoying, but it doesn't seem to be something that would cause that amount of emotional response. So something else has to be happening. Like, either he's like abdicated some responsibility that she thinks he should have and she's mad about it, or he's thwarting some purpose of hers that she's mad about, or something. I don't know.
I also feel like she's rather suspicious of, is it Tatty or Thady? Sorry. Tatty. Of Tatty. I think she's onto him. She may not know exactly that it's Lymond, but I think she definitely is suspicious of him, which we'll get into in the chapter when we get to that point. But
I mean, isn't she the one who asked about Oliamro's other bard, or was that Mistress Boyle? Yeah, it was her. So she's like, hey, what's his name?
Mm-hmm. And there's, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going back to her feelings about Oliamro on page 11. It flat out says Oliamro was one of the mightiest chieftains in English-occupied Ireland, except that it had never yet occurred to him to lead them anywhere. So you could imagine her being annoyed about that if she cares about the future of Ireland and here's this man with all this power to make a difference and he's not doing anything.
Yeah. I mean, if that's her motivation. And it is interesting. Mistress Boyle said that she's here to marry a French guy. So is that part of a plan to get support for Ireland? Is it just, I need to marry someone and so I'll marry a French guy? Like, that seems a little random. So I'm assuming there's more to it than that.
Let me also ask you guys, going back to Tatty Boy, because you were talking about why Lymond would be Oliamro and this would let him kind of perform in a way that he can't in his normal life. So now that we know that he's actually Tatty Boy, we have, in Tatty Boy, disillusionment, intelligence, the remains of high aspirations, perhaps, all soaked and crumbled into servitude and cynicism. Why would Lymond be choosing this as his role to play?
I think it's just going to get him further behind the veil. It's all part of his espionage act. So if he's the one that is translating for the king, or the prince, sorry, Oliamro, now that we know that Oliamro probably doesn't actually speak French at all, or maybe a little, it gets him into those spaces where he can overhear things.
Yeah, and it's also, if he's a servant, or, I mean, I guess he's not exactly a servant, but he's definitely has much lower status than other people. That, again, gets him access to places because he can sort of move around without, move around in sort of that servant unseen kind of way. And then also he's got this, if he sort of develops this reputation of being slovenly and asleep all the time and drunk all the time, then again, it makes him, people will underestimate him and ignore him when he's there, and,
So how about, you noted, Dee, when we were reading Game of Kings, that Lymond is often resigned. I'll also mention there's a moment in the trial at the end of Game of Kings where Lymond talks about how if he had been the older son instead of the younger, he wouldn't have been betrayed by Margaret Lennox and sold off into galley slavery. And this like note of bitterness kind of slips through. That's part of him that he doesn't normally let out. But then here's this character who can be like the bitterest side of him. And we have the disillusionment of Tatty Boy, thinking back to Lymond's I shaped my fate 20 times and had it broken 20 times. It's actually him like letting out this darker side of himself. And I think the servitude is interesting as well, because everyone's trying to buy him. The book starts out with she wanted coffee with Lymond. And so I kind of take this as a little bit of a mockery and a fuck you. Like, this is what you're trying to turn me into.
Yeah. Yeah. And it must be, I mean, it's got to be a little bit freeing to not have to follow all the rules of, you know, high society and all of that. And he had a lot of that when he was an outlaw. So, I mean, he was a slave and then he was an outlaw. And so now he's sort of back in the good graces of society. But I mean, that's got to be somewhat constraining as well. And, you know, trying to put on a brave face for his mother and, you know, all of that. And so yeah, he can just be like, ugh, the world sucks. You know?
Although I think it's probably driving him nuts to be so dirty because he's such a neat freak.
I know. And that should have been another clue, actually, because she draws so much attention to the fact that he's like dirty and slovenly and all that. And it should have been another clue.
Can I read a really obvious clue that as soon as I went back and reread it, I was like, I don't know why I didn't realize this right now. So on page 24, there was silence. Tatty Boy brooded. Then he scratched his dusty curls, ran a soot-blackened hand over his chin, considered clearly having a wash, and thought better of it. So he's running his hand through his hair, and it comes up black. I mean, that should have been everything I needed to know right there.
I actually read that and thought about it, and the first time, and then I was like, oh, well, they just had a fire. Like, they just put out a fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I just took it literally because the bed had been on fire and they were dealing with that. And so I'm like, oh, this is just a sign that this guy is so slovenly. And of course, in retrospect, obviously, that's not what was going on.
There's another more subtle clue on page 32, halfway down the page. With the change of, Una comes out and starts speaking in Gaelic is how this starts. So with the change of language, the warmer impulses of chatter were halted. In the little silence, Master Bala coughed, and as O'Liamro glanced at him, he plumped down, setting his tiny trunk hose in his chair, and said politely in English, and so on. So obviously, Una was speaking directly to Tatty, who is Lymond, and it does say later that Lymond knows a little bit of Gaelic, but he probably didn't really know what she was saying, so he sort of motioned or gestured to O'Liamro, hey, help me out here.
Right.
And then, yeah, I should have picked up on that.
Yeah.
I also super love that it was Mariotta that hooked him up with O'Liamro.
I know. I saw that and I was like, oh, yay.
They're cousins, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know if that means like first cousins or distant cousins, but some kind of cousins. Yeah.
It also makes me very happy that O'Liamro knows that this is Lymond and he's in on it. So you go back and read those first two chapters, and what we saw earlier, what we were talking about last week, how we were like, oh, I don't know if Tatty Boy knows that O'Liamro is Lymond or not. It just completely flips that all on its head. And there's this playful interaction between the two of them that I'm really growing to like. So I hope O'Liamro does get to stick around and doesn't get
me too.
But we can talk about that when we get there.
Well, and also just going back to clues when they have their little conversation where Tatty Boy asks, are you turning me out? And it's because O'Liamro saying you'd prefer like a calmer, more gentle master. It's like you as a spy would prefer your master to be someone who doesn't draw so much attention to himself.
Right. Yeah.
And like on page 30, Boyle is talking to them and Tatty Boy says, a typical Lymondism, with the loud-mouthed hens there are, and the folk with their two keen ears, one engaged for the hen and the other for the boil on the cooking water. She screamed like a kitty-wake, oh, you have a sharp knife at your hip here, O'Liamro. It's like, those are the kind of words that have been used to describe Lymond throughout the very first book, so that should have been something else to pick up on.
Yeah, I think in the first book I got lazy because all the times Lymond was playing someone else, like there was just so much physical description of him, and like his eyes and his hair were described so much that I I just got used to this, like, oh, the blonde guy or the blue-eyed guy, you know. And now after we find, like, after she makes it more explicit that Tatty Boy is Lymond, we get more description of his eyes. I noticed there was this like super explicit, like his blue eyes, and I'm like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, if we had known he had blue eyes from the beginning, that would have been it. I would have been like, oh, there he is.
Yeah.
She's very tricky. I remember the first time I read it, at first I wasn't sure which of the two he was, but then it kept going on and on with Olimro, and there's a part where she describes Olimro's long lashes, and I was like, it must be Lymond. But right. I wasn't as sure as you guys. I was still like, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she was definitely leading us in that direction, and I was just willing to let her lead me there instead of being suspicious. So, but back to the questions I still have from these chapters. So I'm like, so I want to know, like, why is Una so angry, and what's up with Madame Boyle? Like, so that there's that question. Who's trying to kill Lymond and or Lymond? I don't know if we know exactly who's the target of those assassination attempts. Are they connected to Una and Madame Boyle? I don't think we know that either. And then I'm also curious, this didn't come up as much, but there seem to be a whole bunch of different treaties that are happening. So like Erskine is gonna go off and deal with like some northern, I forget where he's going, Brussels, I think.
Yeah.
And there's like the Irish are treating with the French and the English are treating with the Scots and the Irish and the French are treating with the Scots and the Irish. And so like there's all these different sort of like balls in the air in terms of governments making agreements with other governments, but nothing seems to be finalized, because Erskine actually talks about like he has this leverage because the treaties haven't been they haven't been signed, and so he can sort of like lie by omission to the people in Brussels and stuff. And so I'm wondering like how much of that swirling around is motivating all of this stuff.
I think she's definitely setting it up like a spy novel with all these different potential alliances and all these different potential political reasons to disrupt any particular alliance. So you kind of have to pay attention to the politics in order to figure out what the potential motivation might be.
Right. Right.
So before we jump into these chapters, I just want to highlight a few more clues, if that's all right.
Sure.
So just the fact of the Olive being able to speak a bazillion languages and being a poet and being a musician and being super highly educated, Lymond to a T. Also the fact that Lymond tries to save the galley slaves, which you guys were like, oh, that must be Lymond. But actually what Lymond is doing is trying to save the whole ship, even if there's die. Yeah. Lymond is always going to be do the most practical thing, help the majority of people, save the whole ship. He will never act on sentiment. Lymond is sentimental, Lymond is not.
Yeah. And the whole, the thing that was yelled out in French that like caused direction, when I read it back again, it was obvious, it was more obvious that Lymond didn't actually say that someone else did. And so that was...
Yeah, she leaves it ambiguous, so you're not quite sure who said it, but...
It's more like when I read it again, it seemed more likely that Tatty Boy said it than Lymond.
Also, actually, one of the clues to me the first time I read it that I was like, I think this might be Lymond, is when she describes the Olive like a soiled raindrop sliding down to the deck.
Yes.
I was like, she wouldn't use a description that cool if it wasn't Lymond.
Yeah.
We have also, Lymond says, I damned nearly paddled in with the thing in my teeth, meaning the boat. So again, Lymond was busy rescuing the slaves. It was Lymond that cut free the sail, Tatty Boy that cut free the sail. So that's another clue. What else? All the places he wants to sneak into, the universities, the prisons, the boudoirs, the brothels, blah, blah, blah. Like you guys are saying, that is something that a servant, not the top guy, is going to be more likely to be able to sneak in and not be noticed and have people be natural and not put on airs with him.
Yeah, Oliemro, even his personality, like even if it had been Lymond, the way that he was playing his personality wouldn't have, it wasn't subtle. Like he wasn't gonna be able to sneak in anywhere. So we should have known, like, that guy's gonna make a bad spy. He's just too over the top. And,
Yeah.
I thought Lymond was playing him to be so incredibly over the top as part of like, well, no one will suspect it's me. So,
and that's just William Rowe.
that's who I really like, by the way.
He's fun.
I felt so bad for him in the tennis.
Oh God.
Oh my God, it's like the worst, like vicarious embarrassment. Like I cannot even read it.
I did not want to read it. I was just like,
it wasn't all him though. I mean, a lot of it is his sort of Irish pride, but like he gets set up to fail big there. So.
Yeah. It was so
also, the fact that Tatty Boy is the one who's sleeping alone, and we know that Lymond likes to sleep alone. You guys took it as, Liam Rose sleeping with Dooley. That means Dooley must be someone trusted, but actually it's that Lymond sleeps alone.
Right.
Let's see what else. Oh, when he's talking about being kicked out, it would certainly be better for him if Liam Rowe was not so conspicuous. Let's see. I took all these little notes when I was Liam Rowe's oval face. Lymond's never described as having an oval face. So that to me also, as I read it, was like, wouldn't you mention in Game of Kings if you had an oval face? You can't change the shape of your face.
Yeah.
There were a number of descriptors for Liam Rowe back before I knew that I thought sounded a little off, but I figured it's been 2 years, so things could have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
And I thought there was an age disparity that I couldn't quite put like a finger on, and now it makes total sense because William Rowe is not Lymond. So.
Has it been 2 years? Do we know that?
It has been 2 years, yeah, we get that. Because Mary Queen of Scots, it's been 2 years.
Oh, it's 7, right, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I was actually wondering that because if, like, Marietta's pregnant, Tom Erskine got married again, or got married, he wasn't married.
And has a child already.
Yeah.
Doesn't he?
Do they have a kid? Or is it his brother's kids?
Maybe I'm thinking of the other children.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I don't remember.
I can't remember. And there was something else that I was like, oh, time has definitely passed.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Well, what has Lymond? Page 24. Liam Rowe says about Peter Dooley, never look for a true word out of a man with his 2 front teeth crossed. That's a very distinctive description, the 2 front teeth being crossed. So it tells us it's not Lymond. And it also, if this is a character we've seen before, did she just not mention that their teeth are crossed?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I was wrong about Tom Erskine having a kid. I'm looking at the characters and it says children. So I just read it too quickly. Because I do flip back to this character's page almost every time a new name gets mentioned. So
it is hard to keep track of them all. It's convenient that she gives you the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's helpful. I still can't keep track of who Margaret Lennox is related to.
You need a family tree.
Oh my goodness. It's
everyone.
I actually draw one because I think it might be helpful to draw one for her.
I'll send you a Margaret Lennox family tree.
Yeah. And there are too many Margarets. Can I just say there are too many Margarets?
I was reading one of the things that George R. R. Martin said when he wrote Song of Ice and Fire was normally when you're writing a series, they tell you, give every character a different distinctive name, but that's not historically true, as we're seeing in the Lymond books. And so George R. R. Martin intentionally uses the same names over and over because people would name their kid after someone else, or there'd be like family names or regional names.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me, actually, the way, this is a little bit off topic, but the way that female names are repeated it feels like a lot more than, at least in the culture I grew up, like we don't repeat women's names in my family or in like the part of the United States where I come from, but boys' names get repeated all the time. So like fathers will name their sons after them, or grandsons, you'll get your grandfather's name, things like that. But it's super rare for women to have their name repeated. And I'm like, that's so interesting that I don't know why we do that. Like,
so we have the Queen of, or soon to be the Queen of England, which is Mary Tudor. Then we have Mary Queen of Scots. Her mother is Mary of Guise, Marie de Guise.
Right.
And then Mary Queen of Scots sailed to France with 4 girls named Mary.
Mary.
Right. So it's a popular name.
Yeah. Yeah, she has like 4 ladies in waiting or something that are all named Mary.
Yep.
Right. We have Margaret Erskine and we have Margaret
Lennox.
Very different. We have Margaret. Jenny Fleming's mother's name is Margaret. Is that right? Or was Margaret Lennox's mother Margaret?
I think Jenny Fleming is Margaret's mother.
Jenny Fleming
is Margaret's mother.
Is Margaret Erskine.
Margaret Lennox's mother was Margaret Tudor.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so it was like so many Margarets.
I'm gonna draw you a family tree. Okay, before we dive into these chapters, a few more clues. Page 27. Actually, O'Liamro, when they're talking to their first meet Mistress Boyle and Una, and O'Liamro is describing if you'd seen Tatty Boy saving the Navy and talking about how he went up there, and then it says Master Ballard stood for a good deal, but he brought this to a halt. He said,
right, he's like, what? Stop talking about that!
Yep, that is like a big clue.
Yep. I on my second read through, I underlined that and put a little star beside it. I was like, well, that is Lymond.
And then right after that, he makes those 2 very nice smelling young men crack up, which is again a sign of how he's gonna worm his way in despite not being an important person. Yeah. All right, that's all my little sticky notes with clues.
There's also some clues in chapter 3, but we'll go over them as we start discussing it.
Yeah. Okay, so, oh wait, I went all the way to 5. Hang on, I gotta back up. Go to 3. So, chapter 3. We move to Rouen,
I think.
Feel free to post in the comments, anyone, if you know how to pronounce everything.
I've always pronounced it Rouen. I think it's right, but I could be wrong.
That's how the audiobook narrator says it, although apparently he's not very good at French. But I think he looked up some of the key names.
I've studied 3 languages, well, 4 if we include English. None of them were French, so it's like not helpful. Okay, so we basically get this description of the town being really getting ready for the king to come. And in the midst of this, we have this whale thing that comes out. So it's like a paper mache whale or a model of a whale or some sort of like whale-like boat entity thing. Mm-hmm. And it comes out of a house on a trolley, which I thought was pretty funny.
So the entry of King Henri into Rouen really was a thing that happened, and they really did throw this like giant carnival festival party for his entry, and there's these like wood cuttings of it that show all these crazy costumes and like things they did. So this is all stuff that came out of her primary source research.
Yeah, I mean it's like they're having this like circus party carnival thing. So then they have this okay, so here was a thing where I was still thinking O'Liamro was Lymond when I read the beginning of this chapter. And so when I had the whale comes and they have this bit about O'Liamro very neatly fell off his horse. And I thought he was faking, that it was like he just used that as an excuse to see what was going on with the guys pulling the whale, because one of them ends up to be the guy with no heel. So I thought that was all a distraction, but maybe it still was. Because it says Mr. Bala leaned over, the whale at their feet. So he's also paying attention. Yeah, and maybe he's the one who set the horses off. I don't know.
Yeah, I was wondering if this little chance meeting was literally just that, a chance meeting, or if this was another sort of attempt, because one of the 4 men pushing the whale is the guy that set fire to the room. So.
And O'Liamro, she describes O'Liamro as the one who follows them, like that he leaving his horse blithely loose so he doesn't get his horse, and with never a glance at his surroundings, Liam followed these men with the whale. And I assumed it was because he saw that one of them didn't have
He might have seen it.
Yeah.
He and Patty Boy both might have.
But anyway, because there's water happening here, which means there's mud. So they are all leaving footprints around. So
well, and they do notice, because it tells you at the end of the section, they noticed the guy with the missing nail.
Right, so they saw it. So then we have, we just kind of get more descriptions of the town. And then we get Robin Stewart, who I'm so intrigued with this character.
Why?
What's going on with Robin Stewart? I don't know. I still haven't decided if, like, do I like him? Do I not like him? Is he a good guy? Is he not a good guy? Like, I don't know. I like him more after chapter 4, though. So,
I like Robin Stewart for now.
For now, yeah.
Things may happen. I don't know. I'm going to keep my eye on him. He's obviously been pretty important so far, so.
I'm willing for him to be a bad guy.
Might turn out to be one. We'll see.
We don't know. We don't know.
Don't trust anyone.
Speaking of not trusting people and people who are suspicious, okay, Jenny Fleming.
She's pretty suspicious.
I'm giving some side eye here. Like, what?
Yep.
This whole description of her as like wanting to cause mischief, and she doesn't seem to care about consequences, and her daughter is the one who's having to be like, okay, mom, cool it. You know, like Margaret Erskine is having to control her mother because her mother is just causing problems. Like, oh, that's going to be a thing. Like, I don't see that going away. So,
do you have any guesses about what role she's going to play in the story?
Well, she keeps being described as young or young looking and like vivacious and sparkling, like the vivid, autocratic, expensive sparkle of her youth, which makes me feel like talking about autocratic and sparkling make me feel that I just get this sense that she is entitled, like she feels like she's entitled, and that she is sort of sees herself as like pretty, and I'm wondering if there's some like, I'm really attractive to men, so there's going to be some sort of manipulation or like assuming she can have things that she shouldn't assume that she can have. And I just get this picture of Margaret Erskine as like, oh, mother, like this eye roll, you know, like, oh, she's doing it again, you know?
Well, even in this first scene, we see that she knows more than she's letting on. Her and Margaret both know that Taddy is Lymond in this instance. And I like how he cuts her off. Yes, but we must introduce ourselves first. You are Liam, I can tell, and this, aren't there 3 of you? So first of all, how would she have that information if she wouldn't have foreknowledge? And of course, Lymond cuts her off really quickly. The richest soil, said Mr. Balla's cutting voice from behind, is known for its 3 weeds, an old Irish saying. You will excuse us. So he's like, stop talking, like, don't say anymore. And it even mentions later, like, that he sort of chided her at this moment, so.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Definitely a clue if you're, this is why I wanted to cut us off after the second chapter, because we started getting more and more clues that make it really obvious Lymond is Taddy Boy.
Well, I didn't get this when I first read it. After I found out and went back and reread everything, then I caught on to this part. So I was like, ugh, another part.
Yeah. This description of her mother, though, I thought this was really what made me think, like, this is just foreboding. I don't know what's going to happen with Jenny Fleming, but this is not good. Where it says, she, meaning Margaret, she drew her now from this dangerous amusement as she had done many another, and gave no hint as she and Jenny remounted and called greetings and moved off that she knew whom she was facing. So, but this whole idea of like, she pulled her mother away from this dangerous amusement, and she's done it a lot. Like, this is a pattern in her life that she's had to drag her mother away from things that were dangerous. I'm like, oh, that's a disaster waiting to happen. So, and I'm assuming Lymond is going to fall into the disaster. Like, whatever's going on with Jenny Fleming, I think it's not going to be good for Lymond.
Lymond has the skill of falling into pretty much every disaster.
She might end up being the one that sort of accidentally outs him. We'll see.
Maybe. Or manipulates him into something, or, you know.
Don't Google any of the historical characters. I'm just reminding you
I
now.
have not Googled any historical characters. I'm so desperately tempted, but I have not done it. Okay. But I am looking at the character notes and like in the book and like writing tons of who's connected to who. Okay, so then we get what do we see? Yeah, so then we explicitly know that they know that one of the guys with the whale thing was seen running away from the fire. Like, I don't know, I'm assuming we think that he's involved with the fire situation, but
That's what Peter said.
It's super vague. Like, yeah, Peter said he was there.
Mm-hmm. So we have a mystery man.
Yeah. We don't really know anything other than... I still don't understand what she means by the guy with half a foot. Because
he's missing a heel. He doesn't have a heel.
I know, but it doesn't... like, anatomically, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, I understand how you can miss the front half of your foot by it being cut off. I do not understand how you can miss the back half of your foot. It's still attached to your ankle.
I assumed, because we find out towards the end of chapter 4 that he is part of a menagerie. He's working for a menagerie, that he had some sort of, I don't know, maiming, an animal sort of bit his heel off, perhaps.
Right, I assume that too. I just don't understand how that, like, in your foot, when you think about it, like, how can this part be missing and that part not be missing when it connects this way?
What's happening? But I do think this is all part of the whole like carnival funhouse atmosphere of this whole part of the book, and I like this has grown on me in reread, not only because I love what it does with Lymond, but also because I love the carnival atmosphere and just all the really ridiculous over the top stuff. And I love the idea of everything is like a big party and everyone's in all these masks and there's all these strange characters floating around. The double of the king coming up next as well.
It's making a lot more sense why, for a little bit, I was like, why does Lymond keep walking around in a mask? And I'm like, oh, because everybody's walking around in a mask. Like, it's making more sense. For a while, I thought, like, that's super strange. But obviously not strange.
And it also makes sense why he had a hood on or a hair covering the first time we saw him, because that would have been a dead giveaway. It's like, oh, his hair's black.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So we get this whole tennis thing.
Wait, hold on. We missed a part. They go into their Lymond and Liam and I guess Julie, they all go into their room. They've been put up in one of the fanciest hotels, which is incredibly expensive for the entry. And they're looking out the window and they see the guy who is the double of the king.
Right, yeah.
And I have some fan art to show you of this
king.
So let me show you, because this is great fan art. It makes me very happy. This is by Prince of Pictou on Tumblr, and it's Tatty Boy and Liam, obviously. Now, Liam is missing the beard, but nonetheless, I love the way that she like captured whoever the author is. Sorry, I didn't check their gender. I love how they drew the characters, and I love the like dirty Tatty Boy.
Yeah.
And then while we're looking at that, this one I think is by Bella Rowe. This is Tatty Boy on the ship. Also fun. And oh, this is later on. Here's a Lady O'Liamro, a gender swapped O'Liamro from Striped Frozen Sketchpads.
Oh, that's fun.
And then here's a not gender swapped O'Liamro.
That's cool.
Makes me happy.
Yeah.
But this is my favorite.
Okay. Yeah, so we have the fake king across the street. Yeah.
And we also have in that scene Lymond giving practical advice to Liam, talking about, patiently dress as neat as you can for the sake of us all, blah, blah, blah. It's Lymond being practical as usual. Another clue.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they're talking about the tennis, and Liam like, is he good? And it's like, who King Henri is? He's the best athlete in the kingdom.
Well, he says middling good. So it's like, he's a good athlete for France, but, I'm probably better.
But it's also like...
Oh, no, I thought the middling good was being sarcastic. Like, the king was actually a super good athlete, if I remember correctly, right?
Well, I think what Lyman here is saying is, it's the king, so everyone's going to let him win. So it doesn't really matter how good he is. Yeah. He's the best athlete in the kingdom.
It's true, because he's the king. Yeah. But wasn't he actually quite good?
Pretty good in the scene when they're playing, yeah.
Yeah. For some reason, it cracks me up to think of all these kings playing tennis. Because Henry VIII had a tennis court, too. And it was like...
So when I went on the Lymond fan group trip, and we went to Paris, and we went to Fontainebleau, which is incredible. Highly recommend Fontainebleau, even better than Versailles, because it has so much history. But in Fontainebleau, we were taught how to play jeu de paume, which is the ancestor of tennis, which I think is what they're playing here. And it's like this ball that doesn't really bounce. It's like a heavier ball, but otherwise it's a lot like tennis. Anyway, this was one of the coolest experiences of my life, was going to with a bunch of
like this enclosed court with like, yeah.
It's playing jeu de paume at Fontainebleau.
Oh, fun.
The description of the game reminded me a little bit more of badminton than tennis. Maybe it's sort of like a cross between both of them.
Yeah, it was a little more like that, now that I think about it.
I think a super suspicious visit by Una, which my red flags were totally raised because of the exact thing which Dunnett explicitly says, where Una comes to the door and she asks Liam to let her into his rooms, which is like, I just was like, what? Like, that's not something that you're supposed to do. And Dunnett actually says she was alone, something unheard of in a young woman of standing. And I've been a little star by it because I'm like, yeah, that's super shady.
Well, she's doing that because she's giving him secret information, but he is super rude to her. He basically says, it's not a bad habit if you combine it to one person, meaning like basically like everyone's going to think you're a whore, but that's okay if you're just my whore, which is totally rude. And she, as I said, she shuts off the friendliness and it makes it a business relationship.
Yeah, it was super rude of him, but still, like, it's just, she shouldn't have, like, that was just crazy that it violates social norms so much that I was completely shocked that she would have done that. And so
supposedly she's helping.
Yeah, it's not good. So, which honestly makes me wonder if she's not, like, I don't think she is who she says she is. Like, I don't think a person, if she's supposed to be like a well brought up young woman of good social standing, like, I don't think she would have done that at all, like, no matter the cause. So, I don't know. It makes me super suspicious of who she is.
Also notable here, by the way, is that Liam actually did take off his Irish frieze outfit and really did like buy like a fancy outfit to go meet the king. So he was going to be all proper and put in effort.
Yeah, he was following Lymond's advice. He was going to do the thing that would have been the most helpful thing.
But I also love that part of him really didn't want to, and part of him loved having an excuse not to.
Yeah. So I wrote, like, here, does she lie? Like, is she lying? The first, I was like, this is just so sketchy.
I mean, there's two possibilities, right? Either there really was a plot to trick him and it got canceled, or she's lying. Or I guess it could be that Teresa Boyle or someone else put her up to it and she didn't know.
Yeah, I was going to say someone could have manipulated her into telling him this for specifically the fact to fool Liam, which could lead back to, I'm not so sure if people have been trying to kill him or discredit him or to keep him away from the king up to this point.
I do not want her to be manipulated into this. I want her to actually, mainly because I want her as a character to be a strong antagonist character. Like, I want, if she's going to end up being an antagonist, which I kind of hope she is because she's interesting, I want her character to have a lot of agency and to be making choices and being a strong antagonist character, because I just think that's interesting as a reader. So I would like it if she's not being manipulated into this. Like, if she is actually intentionally trying to throw a huge wrench into everything. And if she's being intentional about it, like I said before, Liam could have died. Like, this was,
it was very close.
I think she, you know, if she's the antagonist character, I'm hoping she is, she would be well aware of that and, you know, sending him to his potential death by this thing, which is
Definitely
awful. So, but also interesting. So it's like you get these characters, and I'm like, wow, they're terrible, but I'm so intrigued by them. So she does this whole, she tricks him with they're gonna, you know, have this fake king and you shouldn't be fooled by it, and they're just trying to make fun of you, which I can totally see as a really good trick, because, you know, there's this natural tendency to not want to be seen as provincial or the country bumpkin, you know, coming into this super sophisticated group of people. And so if she's saying, well, they're just making fun of you, they're mocking you, then there's this intense emotional desire, like, to not fall for that and to not be seen as the laughing stock. And so I can see where, so when he comes into this tennis situation, he's not, like, in addition to not being Lymond, he's also emotionally primed not to see the clues, you know, and he's emotionally sort of set up to be oblivious.
And he's already been mocked, and he knows that they think it's a terrible emergency, that he's so, you know, gauche and uncool. It's just gotta be really insulting. Like, he is actually an educated, intelligent person.
Right. Exactly.
Who do these French think they are with their perfume and their bullshit?
Yeah. Like, yeah. I mean, I feel like our entire country has this attitude. So, like, we're, anyway. Okay. So,
actually, so as we have the lead-in to the tennis or Jeu de Paume, whatever they play, there's a whole intro section, which is on pages 43 and 44.
Which is talking about the king?
Yeah.
The talking about Henri II?
Yeah, so I wanted to show you guys, I found an article, which I will post a link in the video description, that has some great pictures. Here we go.
Yeah, because I definitely want to get a sense of, like, what's going on with the king.
So this is the same backstory that we get in the book about how when Henri's father, Francois I, was it was like captured, he traded his sons, and then his two young sons were put in prison, the younger one being Henri because the older one died.
Did he die in prison?
I don't know how he died. The article even says it doesn't matter, he died, he didn't become the king. But so here we have the child Henri, and then so they spent 4 years in this prison, and apparently before Henri, according to this article, before Henri went off to prison, Diane de Poitiers actually gave him a kiss goodbye, and he sort of like fell in love with her as a 7-year-old, and like dreamed of her while he was in prison. And then when he came back, like it says in the book, she was hooked up with him to like teach him court manners. And you can see she's beautiful and she's very, very powerful.
She Francois' mistress as well?
That's that. They weren't involved?
No.
Okay.
Because the book seemed to imply that they were.
I thought that too.
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah, there was a line about her going directly from his father's bed to him.
It says some said. Okay, so I guess it was a rumor. I don't know, maybe.
Okay.
But she was like super beautiful, super accomplished, super smart, super powerful, super influential. So there's Henri as an adult.
Ooh.
And the two of them hooked up, and then he married, for political reasons, he married Catherine de Medici, who's obviously also very powerful, but she's not as beautiful as Diane, or Diane, obviously. And so even though they were married, he openly was with Diane the whole time. And this is their monogram. You can see this is actually at the Louvre. I mentioned last time. It's like a big H, but it's got two D's that like make the H.
Okay.
That's also what the brooch was that Dandy Hunter had in the first book that he gave his mom. And here's a Diane in the Louvre, a statue of the goddess Diana that Henri commissioned to honor her. So the whole time they were, like, he was king, he basically had his wife and his mistress was probably more powerful, or at least as powerful. So I'll post a link to this article. It is super interesting to have all these pictures.
Yeah.
They also, in that little section, mentioned the Duke N de Montmorency. I may be saying that wrong.
Yes.
So I think is got some interesting description about him and where he fits into everything.
What was interesting to you?
Just the history of it. I don't think I've ever actually heard of him, but he seems to be important in the court, so I feel like he's going to be important in the book as well.
So he's going to come up more later. I didn't want to overwhelm you guys with history, but also on my Lymond adventure, we went to his chateau with a Lymond fan group, and they like played, I forget what it was, some Renaissance song on an original instrument for us, and it was so cool.
Cool.
Yeah, so he apparently made Francois angry and was put in prison, and then when Henri became king, he let him out of prison. So
basically we get a whole bunch of stuff about how all these people who were out of power with Francois then like connected with Henri and got back into power with him, and there's like maybe a very subtle implication that someone got rid of Francois because so many people got back into power when Henri became king.
Yeah. And do we have a sense of why the de Guise are so, like, why Henri loves them so much? Was that in there?
I don't think it's been made clear to us yet, but they're very powerful. They're supporting him, so they're beneficial to him. They're useful. Yeah. They're, one of them is the Queen Dowager of Scotland, so they have this power that could connect,
And she's the oldest, right? The oldest of the siblings is the Dowager Queen.
Yeah, but they're all in positions of like very high power, and then of course everyone else is suspicious of them because they're, jealous or whatever.
Sure.
I was gonna say also, there's a line on 44. When he was king, he kept a court still of marzipan and kisses. The Dunnett fanzine from like the 80s and 90s was called Marzipan and Kisses after this line. I tried to buy a bunch of back issues, but their online stores closed for the pandemic, so I couldn't get any. So I don't know what it was like, but I want to read it.
I also actually love this bit about the next part of that line where it says he kept a court still of marzipan and kisses, but a tough, esoteric, gamey core also persisted. So it's like there's this surface of light and sugar and candy and kindness and kisses and stuff, but there's this core of strength, maybe like gamey, like tough, esoteric, gamey. So it's like this inner, not quite as sophisticated, like country toughness that was there, which
when it's not all perfume and makeup, there's some toughness, darkness maybe.
Yeah, so I don't know how much you want to say about this scene with the real king. It's
super embarrassing.
It's super embarrassing. I was so cringy reading it. I was so embarrassed for him. There was points I kept going through this going, this is the real king, and then I'm like, definitely the real king, and like Oh yeah, this is the real king. like just parts where you get the reactions from the other courtiers who are like super nervous about what they're saying, and like obviously they wouldn't care if he wasn't the real king. And yeah, and then I wrote at the bottom because I was still thinking he was Lymond at this point, and so I'm like, why does Lymond not see this?
Mm-hmm.
This is where I began to be suspicious because it made no sense that he wouldn't be able to read this room and read these people.
Yeah.
And you can't help but pity the translator that is sort of assigned to Liam, the Monsieur de Genston.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
And like, the king makes him translate, and he's like, "Oh shit, I'm gonna tell
don't make me say that to the actual king."
There's two things I like also in this last bit. One is Liam wrote, "In concern, in contrition, and with at the back of his eyes the faintest unregenerate spark of joy." That part of him that just likes creating chaos and likes kind of being like "fuck you" to this court that thinks so poorly of him. But then also right before that, I really like I like the way that the king tells him off, which is just it hurts. It's so painful. "We were prepared to entertain you at our court as an equal, and without offering you or dreaming of offering you the insult of our compassion. You had better, Prince of Barrow, you had better think well and invite that insult from us now." Like, damn, that king knows how to scare you.
Yeah.
So I assume at this point, this is when you started to figure out, not Lymond.
Something was definitely up.
Yeah. And he kind of tries to fix it, and it's just beyond.
He's like, "Yeah, oops, I didn't realize
I thought this is what was happening." And I'm like, nope.
No.
So sad.
I think also if this didn't convince you, you get the kind of ending bit in this chapter where you learn that Towdy Boy spent the time visiting every alehouse, picking up rumors. So come on, that's Lymond. He's the one visiting the alehouse, picking up the rumors.
Yep. So it is. Okay, so we have this utter disaster, and so Liam had no pressing wish to tell his henchmen of the event. As it turned out, he had no need. And he was just like, of course he didn't want to tell Lymond because he totally screwed it up. Yeah. So everyone in town is talking about it. They are basically under house arrest until they are deported in a few days. And yeah, so that's chapter 3.
Mm-hmm. All right. Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. So they're on house arrest and they're not supposed to go anywhere.
Are they on house arrest yet, or did that happen at the end of chapter 4? I don't think they're on house arrest yet.
Oh, that's right, because they're able to move around because of the whole thing. You're right. But people start visiting them, like they start drifting by. And I love this description of like the young boys are gathering around sorry.
Are you cooking something?
Yeah, so they're accosting like Towdy Boy gets accosted in a tavern.
Well, and I think it's people who are like, if the French are being like against you, you want to come ally with someone else? You want to come ally with English?
Yeah, and
ally with English.
So it says that Liam sent a letter to Mistress Boyle with a lighthearted account of what had passed.
He's so sweet.
Yeah. Forestalling a visit or apology and courteously taking his leave. So basically he's trying to like distance himself from them so that they don't get, tarred with the same brush.
Which is really generous because they're the ones that set him up.
Right. And it says, after all, they had to live in the country. Una, after all, would marry a Frenchman, which that's more generous than I would be. Darn it.
Liam's not a bad guy.
Yeah. He doesn't seem to hold a grudge. So.
We also get right after that a whole bunch of like political description of like Marie de Guise and the precarious political situation she's in.
She's mad.
And I love how impatient she is with all the men, and she's like the hard politician in the family, and she just wants to like talk honestly, and she has to pretend that she's just there to visit her daughter.
Yes, this whole section where she says, so there's this paragraph she talks about how she has to move correctly and do everything perfectly, and she must behave to everyone around her as if she had come merely to visit her child, as if given her own way she would not have smashed the gilded bubble of dance and laughter with a blow, so that these damned lackadaisical, self-important, rich, preening men would be hurled by circumstances round the conference table where she would have them to discuss with all the gifts in their power the future policies of France and of Scotland. She's just like, get off your asses and deal with this.
Yep.
Nobody is.
We also has a son who she hasn't seen in 10 years, which was news to me. The Duke de Longueville,
who's a half brother to Mary Queen of Scots.
Yeah.
Because Marie de Guise had been married before she married the King of Scotland. There's also a little hint here that the Scots are getting impatient with the French, who are now basically like taking over their country and all their forts, and they're looking over at England like, And actually, we get a little prelude of the upcoming religious wars where the Scots, Protestantism is trying to take hold in Scotland. The English are Protestants, the French are Catholics. So there's also like a happening here.
Yeah. Oh, Luther and his the chaos. So the patience of the Queen Mother has run out.
And she is pissed off that her spy just got kicked out of France, and she has secretly called him in for a visit.
Yep. And it's Daddy Boy.
There is a very important line here that is, I think, one of the most important lines in the book. It is, I want his allegiance to be mine. This is when he's eavesdropping, but she doesn't know he's eavesdropping. She says, I need it. But far more than that, the Queen will need it. This is the moment most critical in his life and ours. If I do not seize him now, we shall never have him. And now is the moment. For I mean to take this man in his failure, Master Erskine, in his failure and not in his success. How do you think that makes Lymond feel?
Yeah. I mean, is he ever his own person? Like, he's always being pulled in so many directions by so many people, and
and if he were Richard, if he was the Baron, he'd have his own power base, but he doesn't. And we know how much he cares about politics, and we know how much he wants to make the world a better place, but he has no power base to act without selling himself. And here's this woman trying to buy him, and she doesn't necessarily have the good of Scotland in mind. She has the good of the de Guise family in mind.
Yeah.
And the good of her own progeny.
Yes, which he also has in mind, but like in a different way than she does.
Yeah. She wants Scotland to serve her daughter, and he wants her daughter to serve Scotland.
That's where we put it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we find out for sure Lymond is Tatty Boy.
And I was like, oh, of course.
I know.
Wait, was that when you realized it?
No, I mean, I didn't really know for sure, but yeah, maybe.
Really?
Yeah. It's, I mean, if you don't pick up on the clues, like, it's like this, wait, what? moment, which is actually kind of a really good moment. Like, it's cool. Like, I think if it's one of those great things that an author can do where they, like a mystery author is really good at, where they can seed all the clues. A really, really, really good mystery author can seed all the clues to the correct answer throughout the story, but you don't realize what you've been reading. And then at the end, when it's revealed and you're shocked, but you can go back and see how, like, oh no, that really was the real ending. And to me, that's the sign of an excellent mystery author. And I think that she did a pretty good job of this. Yeah.
I agree.
I was fooled.
What?
Now you know to look out for things like this next time.
Yes.
We learned our lesson. Ugh, I feel chastised. Okay, so we find out that there's no more hiding. Lymond is definitely daddy boy. So then we get this idea that there's a sense that there's more danger than we realized happening here. So the queen, the baby queen, not the dowager queen, is in danger. And even though the dowager is kind of trying to downplay that, I feel like as the reader, it's clear that there's more going on. Things are unsafe in a way that I didn't realize they were.
Well, and she even says, like, and what if the queen, my daughter's safety were in question?
Mm-hmm.
And then she's like, and Lymond asks, is it? She's like, no, of course not.
Yeah, she tries to walk it back, but like,
we get an idea.
Something's going on here. And it makes me wonder, like, is this a plot against the De Guise? Because if Mary, the young Scottish queen, is married to the Dauphin, then what does that do to the De Guise family? Or is it a plot against Scotland? Is it a plot against France? Like, there's a bunch of options here for why she's in danger.
The Scottish could be trying to stop this marriage to France. It could be Scottish Protestants. The English could be trying to stop it because they want Scotland. The French could be trying to stop it because they're sick of sending all this money to Scotland.
Yep. So many things. It could be personal. Like there could be somebody with a vendetta against,
Yeah.
So many options.
Hunter.
What?
It could be Danny Hunter.
It's definitely Danny Hunter.
Not Danny Hunter.
So we also have a reminder in this scene of the deal they made. What he did in France was his own affair by their mutual agreement and not hers. And so this reminder of why did he make that deal? And then also the line that starts in at the kind of next section on the top of page 57, to Lymond, presumably the interview meant no more than an irritation brushed aside. I think the presumably is very telling.
Yeah.
It actually must have meant something significant to him.
It's very important. Yeah.
So did you guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Lymond, he doesn't want to be sort of bought and sold by people in power. We've talked about that a lot, and his not wanting to be controlled by that. But at the same time, he also has a deep sense of duty and a deep sense of responsibility. So if he is needed by the young queen, by Scotland, he is going to respond to that, and it's not going to be something that he brushes off as inconsequential or like that he could walk away from. He's not it doesn't matter that the queen isn't paying him or he's not obligated to her in any particular way. Like, he's not going to walk away from something that endangers the young queen or something that endangers Scotland. Like, Lymond is tied to that. And he may not like that. Like, he may not be.
It's a difficult position to be in, like on a tightrope, getting pulled in different directions and trying to keep independence while also trying to act on behalf of, the greater good of the people of Scotland.
And feeling an obligation towards something doesn't mean that you're happy about. Like, if I'm honor bound to do something, that doesn't mean I'm happy that I'm going to be doing it. So
I like the idea that Tatty Boy is a way of him kind of expressing his frustration about the position he's in. Like, again, it's like, this is what you're trying to turn me into. Are you sure you like it now that you see it? You sure this is what you want? And like all this like bitterness he has that he won't express because he's such a, polite, kind, like, he's got a strong ego and super ego that can control those like dark id aspects of himself. But like Tatty Boy lets that id side come out in a way.
Yeah. And it's interesting how fast he can switch between them two. I thought that was kind of a key bit of this next where it says he very soon after that he vanished altogether for a moment, and when he took the cobbled crown of the street again, it was in the portly, pot-bellied, unmasked, and alcoholic person of Liam Rowe's secretary. So like whatever this disguises that he has, it's not that elaborate. I mean, it's convincing.
Yeah.
Although people who've met him before aren't necessarily convinced. He's going to be concerned in a bit that they won't be convinced. But whatever the disguise is, it's easy to get in and out of it quickly. So that's interesting. I think it's interesting to remember for later.
So I think there's also, there's an interesting bit at the end of that section on page 58. He runs into Robin Stewart and he says, you know, would it interest you to come have a drink with a friend of mine? You'll need to make the most of your days left in France, which was exactly the opinion of Francis Crawford Lymond accepting. So at this point, he does think he's going to be leaving and he wants to make the most of it, which kind of goes back to what he said to Tom at the beginning. He's there just for frivolous fun. It makes you wonder how much is he there for duty and helping the Queen, and how much is he there just as an excuse to party.
There was one other thing in this section that I wanted to point out, which was Robin Stewart. And this, like, I'm still, I'm torn about Stewart and what I think about who he is as a character. And there's a thing where he says, Stewart, they see this church lantern that's shining, and Stewart himself, he glanced up at the tower. He laid a hand on Tatty Boy's shoulder. His purpose, in a muddled way, was to give comfort. His need was to receive it. And so it's like this, you get a sense that this guy's super conflicted and like he's trying to be nice, but what he needs Tatty Boy to comfort him, but but he wants to give comfort. So it just makes me feel like Stewart, I don't know. I'm of two minds about Stewart.
He's very needy.
Yeah.
What page was that on?
57. At the bottom of 57.
Oh.
So, yeah.
And his purpose was to give comfort, his need was to receive it. Like, there's a part of him that does want to give comfort. There's also that part of him that felt guilty about not helping the galley slaves and then went and helped them. Like, there's a part of him that does want to do good, kind things for others.
And it's totally possible he feels super guilty about the whole fake king thing, because he was kind of supposed to keep an eye on them, and then Liam Rowe went off on this like disaster of a appointment with the king, and like Robin was not there to prevent it. And
I don't think he could have known that was going to happen, though.
No, but I can see how you would feel like perhaps if he is feeling somewhat responsible for the party, that he fell down on that job a little bit.
So we get a whole bunch more interesting character bits with Robin Stewart actually on page 60 as well, when they go into Michelle Arison's, which is the printer.
Sculptor / printer. Yeah.
Yes. Because we have Robin Stewart going off about how he doesn't like Liam Rowe because he's so foolish, and then how how dare Liam Rowe act like he thinks that you're the fool and that he's the wise one laughing at you. And then Lymond turns it right back on him and says, whereas it's yourself is the wise, tolerant fellow, meaning you're doing to Liam Rowe exactly what you're accusing Liam Rowe of doing to other people. Mm-hmm. And then I love the way that like Stewart needs to feel better than other people because he's insecure himself. And so he's kind of ripping on Liam Rowe. And then it says that basically that Lymond kind of fed the lions of envy, curiosity, and aggression with the tidbits of gossip that he gives about Liam Rowe and puts them to sleep, which causes this calmness to come upon Robin Stewart. So Lymond has he's calmed this aggressively insecure person, and Robin Stewart just bought it hook, line, and sinker, and it worked. Yeah, it's a super weird, interesting scene that gives you a ton of character stuff about both of them.
Yeah, and there's this really great bit that comes up just right after that, where he's saying, Lymond's kind of feeding this. He's like, you don't need an outside opinion. Like, surely you know yourself. And he says, I know myself, said the archer. His bony hands tightened white on his tankard. I don't need to like what I know.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
He
but
doesn't.
God, do we know other people? And so then Lymond, for like, who is it? Diabni?
Dominic.
He's like, you needn't see much of him, Shirley. He knows the secret of a good life. Has he taught you it? I can learn, said Stuart with the same suppressed violence. Violence is an interesting word. I haven't a title. I haven't money or education. I've not even a decent name. I've got to learn, and I will tell you this. I'll work like a dog for the man that'll teach me. And that just made me go, like, I can see Lymond being really attracted to that idea, like that this guy needs someone. He recognizes that he lacks education and society, and all that, and he desperately wants someone to teach him. And I can see, from what we know of Lymond, he would be like, oh, come into my fold, young one, and I will teach you all you need to know.
He can't seem to resist mentoring like Will Scott, for example.
Exactly. I'm like, is this going to be the Will Scott of this book?
Also, I think it's oh, sorry, what?
I said I see parallels.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
For sure.
And it's like a good opportunity for Lymond to get information out of this character. So
yeah, I mean, Lymond's definitely using him. How much is he caring about Robin Stewart versus how much is he just feeding the envy or whatever to get what he wants?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Robin Stewart is much more self-aware of the needs that he has than Will Scott was, like, in terms of, or at least that's what it seems like in terms of what he's saying. Like, he's saying, I've got a lot to learn. I would, if someone would teach me, like, it seems.
He's very hungry for a
yeah, he's hungry for a mentor. He's hungry for someone to.
I think it's interesting. There's actually, even though that Robin and Lymond do not like each other, and they both have contempt for each other, there's a parallel where, you know, we have Robin, I don't need to like what I know, meaning he doesn't like himself. But then we have Lymond's observation on Lymond, he's afraid he might not be quite good enough. Mm-hmm. They're both actually underneath, like, kind of putting on airs, but afraid they're not good enough.
Yeah. And at the same time, they're both kind of arrogant and full of themselves, like both of them. Mm-hmm. There's this whole scene where, like, Robin Stewart at the beginning when we first met him, where he's like, nobody's as good as me, you know. There's that whole bit about being successful and yeah, so they're just, yeah.
Also, we have Taddy Boy pointing out, since Lymond is such a wise, scholarly fellow, and he is, make no doubt of that. So a reminder that Lymond, even though he plays this fool, isn't a fool at all. He's very smart. And the line a little lower, detached irony about the world's work is Lymond's rule. And that is where he is to be pitied, if you are dead keen to pitying in some way. So then in a way, this is kind of Lymond looking down on Lymond. Like, it's not his foolishness that he should be ashamed of, it's his detached irony.
Yeah. He's not, I mean, it goes back to that whole, he has all this power and he's not using it. And he's just, he could lead people and he's not. And
exactly. Like, I mean, look at Lymond. What would Lymond do with that kind of position?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. So then we get the question of, what is Robin up to? Because, so Taddy says, like, the best way to success or the other thing is an illegal printing press? Question mark. And by speechless instinct, the archer's hand moved to his sword. So this statement threatens him. Then his face relaxed, his hand dropped. There was a decent drunken crony. Here was a decent drunken crony who would be gone in 3 days. So he's not a threat. Robin's like, oh no, like, this guy isn't a threat. He's going to be gone. The presses were not normally used at this hour. He had never contemplated Mr. Bella detecting them. But Dad, what harm could a man do who'd be thrown out on his ear if he so much as breathed on the king's boots? So, in other words, he's like, yeah, this guy's not a threat. But something's going on with printing presses.
Specifically the one in the basement.
Yeah. Basement.
And I love that Lymond on his, like, you know, one of his first days in France has managed to find where all the Bohemians are hanging out.
Yeah. All these people and their scandalous reading material.
And then Lymond, like, he like looks at one of the pages, insults the author, and that sets off a flaming argument with Michelle Harrison that they, super enjoy. Nothing makes them more excited.
Yeah. And I also love that they figured out the printing press by that the rhythm of it that you couldn't hear, but he could feel in his feet. And there's this thing about because the printing press, it was one of those huge ones. It would probably was clinking really, like thunking really rhythmically, but like 2 stories below in the basement or whatever. So
it gives you an idea that Lymond must have been hanging out with Bohemians in France at some other times in his life that he recognizes the sound of the printing press.
Right.
So you guys were saying like, oh, are we going to get Lymond backstory? Like, this is definitely a hint.
Something's going on here.
So, historical question. Was there some sort of illegality to owning a printing press at this time? Was it like a state function and nobody else was really allowed to have one? Or is it just because they make a whole sort of bit later about paper being smuggled in and how it would be illegal?
The whole printing press itself was illegal. I don't know I do know that certain writing material was definitely illegal. So like there are things you were not allowed to print and you were not allowed to distribute. So things that would be like treasonous, religious texts that are against the commonly held religious beliefs of the day. So political text, religious text, like all of that is going to be, you're
right,
causing sedition or whatever. So you can't do any of that. So having a secret printing press would, like, if this is what the purpose they're doing for it, then it would be illegal too. Yeah.
And you can see why they would do a crackdown at this moment, because this is when the king is about to do this big entry. So they're probably like, oh, we better stop all the subversive materials.
Right. We don't want things being posted around crying for the removal of the king or anything of that sort.
Yeah, or Protestantism or whatever else.
Yeah. Scary Protestants.
Yeah. There's also a bit on page 62 when Lymond, he's so observant. He's also noticed that there's other people. They left their drinking materials upstairs. So he knows there's people downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
He sees Kirkcaldy of Grange, whose name he knew perfectly well and who had made the afternoon's clumsy approach in the tavern. This is the guy who's Scot, who's offering to hook up a Liamro with the English.
Mm-hmm.
And Sir George Douglas and his brother-in-law Tom Lanray.
Whoops.
And I absolutely love Lymond's reaction where he like stands on the stairs and he like stops for a minute and he's like, He's like, yep, I'm going for it.
No.
Fire.
Yeah. And it's like, there's this moment of like, should I back out? Is this gonna destroy things? Like, yeah, let's try it.
A rare smile flickered over the Olive's dark face and he ran downstairs slightly to join her. Fun times.
Yeah. So then we get a little backstory into the Douglases, just a bit of historical context. And this is where I started doing like family tree stuff. Like, oh my gosh. So Angus married Margaret Tudor, and they had a daughter, Margaret, who married the Earl of Lennox and is a contender for several crowns, but was embarrassingly prone to like trying to force her father into doing things that were politically not expedient. And then we get, so George is Margaret's uncle, is what I'm reading out of this. Yeah, okay. So then they tried to control James V, and the present Queen Mary, but I think they are saying that they basically implying they have had varying.
Yeah, the Douglases, as we knew from the previous book, they were basically trying to help the English and like, playing both sides, but more or less trying to kind of hurt Scotland and help England take power.
Yeah, and their levels of success in this are varying as they are in and out of favor with England and Scotland to varying degrees. But the key point here is that George knows Lymond really well. So, and then they're still trying to retreat, but no.
Always.
Yeah. So you're gonna say?
I just said always move forward.
Oh yeah, keep going forward. So then we have this bit where Laura was saying earlier, so he insults an author and they get into this fight, and it seems to be like, I think they really enjoy the fight. Like,
there's a really important line about Robin Stewart. While Tatty Boy and Arison dive into their passionate conversation, Robin Stewart stood by, full of proprietorial pride and black jealousy. So he's proud that he brought this person who's a hit, and he's super jealous that he's not the one having the amazing connection with someone.
Yeah.
And maybe he's jealous of Arison having the connection with Tatty Boy that he wants with Tatty Boy. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, Robin, it's interesting. And then we get this conversation with the guy doing the woodcuts.
Well, right before that, we have George Douglas, who comes by all curious, and then I think it's Robin tells him that the Irish party is leaving on Thursday, and George is like, oh, never mind, and apparently this dispenses his...
Hi, Lymond.
Yeah.
But yes, we meet Abernathy, the Indian carving the block of wood.
Who... Is he a spy? Like, what's going on with this guy? Like, something is super shady about this guy, because he and Lymond have this whole, like, exchange of equals almost, where, like, Abernathy does this, like, knife throwing trick and is gonna, like, damage Robin's coat, and then Lymond prevents it with a, like, better knife throwing trick, and they sort of have this, like, they're looking at each other, and it's something is definitely going on there. They seem to be showing off with the whole knives thing. And
well, and there's a moment of connection where, like, Robin is, like, we saw Robin mocking O'Liamro to try to make himself feel bigger. He's mocking Abernathy, like, directly in front of him. And you know, he's being super, like, racist and insulting.
Yeah, super racist. Right. Like, with language and, like, mocking his French or English or whatever they're speaking.
And so that's why Abernathy is then, you know, threatening to ruin Robin's white jacket with the ink, with the knife trick. And that's why Lymond makes the joke with Abernathy about Moore, the way that Robin had been mocking him. So it's like they have this bond, even though Lymond also protects Robin's white jacket.
Because Lymond is clearly not mocking him. Like, they clearly have this sort of, the connection. They have this moment of seeing this sort of equal exchange, and Lymond does make the joke with him instead of at him about the Moor, but then the shouting begins.
Yes.
So.
And then this is a delightful scene.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So Lymond spots that the guard is coming. He's the one that climbs up and looks. And then I love that his plan is drunken, flamboyant, and shatteringly practical, which is Lymond in a nutshell.
That is Lymond.
And which gives me flashbacks to the ostrich and the wrestling match and the bagpiping. It's like this scene is cut in the same cloth.
So basically, they're pretending that they're practicing a scene for the king, right? That they're putting on some sort of thing for this entry. And so they have this, like, fake stage, which is the printing press, and they've got fake scenery, which is the paper, and they've got, like, he's just
they've got Lymond, like, strung up and playing a character and, like, throwing things at people.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, we're doing this, like, we're doing a pantomime for the public that we're practicing.
It's almost like they're doing a mumming, like a mummers parade. Like, that's what I imagine that this procession is going to be like.
Yeah. I love that for years after, in Arison's circle, they told the story of that night. It made an impression.
It's like they have this raid coming and they avoid the raid and they trick the guards and it's hugely dramatic and funny and you can see why they're gonna dine out on this story for years.
And it ends with this amazing imagery of like the Greek gods falling. Like the Delphic oracle tackled low, sagged with godlike indifference, and stuffed her august nose at last into the copper. Abrupt as an overtaxed weightlifter, other deities fell. Someone whirled a stone elbow, skirling, paste-soggy clothes ripped, and in the glorious semi-inebriated whirl of pounding flesh, the thicket of flailing arms and belling throats and the shouts of damnable hilarity, blood and ink became one.
Yeah.
Which is super evocative. It's like this, the gods are falling, there's some kind of energy happening with pounding flesh.
Yeah.
And blood and ink becoming one. Like,
right. And I just have images of like these statues of Greek gods like breaking and people like grabbing various body parts and like flailing them around like a stone elbow and various other bits.
This is why I love this book, because I want to go to this party. Not just this one, but there's a lot of
this one.
I want to go to this one first.
Maybe.
No.
They everybody here, so Taddy Boy goes back to his lodgings at like 3 a.m, makes a huge scene because it says not a few people heard him arrive, so everyone hears this and he's singing.
I love what Liam says to him. He says, "Death alive, the world's only liquid chapbook."
He's singing this song. Interestingly, he's still not breaking character because he's singing a song about Ireland, which
in character.
Yeah. So he says his voice was pleasant without accent and clear as a bell. So
there's a bunch of stuff that I love in here. There's God, I'm full of sour wine and cow's feet, and you could make scones from my underwear, because he's selling the paste.
Because of the paste, because it's like a flour paste. So, yeah.
I also love the description of him as a prodigal olive. And then we have also, interesting because we were just hearing Robin Stewart ripping on a Liam Rowe. Now we have a Liam Rowe ripping on Robin Stewart. And he says, in Ireland, that man would be put into petticoats and set to milking the goats. He's a terrible letdown to his sex. Which is an interesting way to insult someone. And I sort of wonder if it means he thinks Robin is gay? TBD?
Or girly in some way?
Yeah.
I don't know. Also, I love that he's like, what have you been doing with the Dowager Queen? Like,
yeah, right. Yeah, that's where he thinks Lymond has come from.
Yeah, he's like, the Queen has some seriously odd entertaining tastes. Like, oh no. But then, so he does say like don't worry about the Queen. Like she has some worries. So he's clearly been thinking about like what the Queen said. But don't worry. And then we get this whole bit about his, like he has dyed his hair and the gold of his hair is starting to peek through and he needs to re-dye it and all of that.
Also the fact that Lymond is tipsy but not drunk. So he's only been drinking about 1/10 of what he appeared to have been drinking, but it was at least enough to make him tipsy.
Yeah, he was a little bit affected.
And probably has been doing that the whole 3 weeks now. Because it's, constant explanations of, and Taddy Boy was drunk in a corner somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
really good way to eavesdrop when everyone thinks you're passed out drunk.
Everyone thinks you're sleeping. So they have this conversation about are they gonna stay? So like Lymond's like, hey, if I can work it out, like would you stay?
Well, he says, will you wager I can't enter the royal circle as Taddy Boy Bala?
Yeah. It's like, would you go? And then I love Liam Rowe. He's like, as your olive, let you not be tempting me. So like, we're going to switch roles. But.
Well, and first Liam Rowe thinks like the Queen Dowager is going to help him. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Lymon's like, no, like as Liam Rowe, the nonsense will sort itself out. After the pleasure of berating the King's Majesty, it might be pleasant to spend the winter at his expense, which goes back to that idea that Oliamro is just trying to like mooch off the king for a while. So it kind of makes me wonder what his finances are like. Because we talked earlier about him leading people, but I wonder if he's like cash poor. You know, like
You know that Ireland is
and rich and cash poor.
Yeah.
Like who knows? So so Oliamro says, the powerful old woman there in it, said Oliamro. This nonsense is to be sorted out, is it? And Francis Crawford of Lymond needs a sponsor if that awkward clod of an Irishman will drop his pretensions to pride. And that's an interesting way to be, because we were talking earlier about like his self-image, like, and just thinking of himself as an awkward clod of an Irishman.
Yeah. I think Oliamro is very proud, and he's very insulted by the way the French are trying to use him. And so he's just like, I'm going to go over there, get them to spend money on me, and I'm going to be like, screw you, and I'm going to laugh at them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's what Lymond has contempt for him about, not him being ridiculous.
Yeah.
But then he does the big reveal at the end that they have been put under house arrest, like you were saying before. So he takes up Lymond's bet. He's like, how are you going to obtain a foothold at court being locked up in here until Thursday?
Yep. And we find out that it was Marietta that set all this up, which that was a lovely little bit of reveal. So to please his cousin Marietta is why he did this.
Oh, and we find the guy with the missing heel. His name is Pierre Destais, and he's one of the keepers of the elephants in the menagerie.
And do you know who one of the other people that works for the menagerie is?
Who?
We have met him in the previous scene. And I only know this because I looked at the character list in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I know who.
I didn't look at the character.
Spoiler to say?
You can say it.
Archibald Abernathy, who was the Indian guy that was carving.
Oh, I did not look at the cat. Oh, I wasn't looking at the character list. That is interesting.
I look at that every time there's a new name. I was like, if this name is in the front, then they're probably important. If they're not, then probably not.
Okay.
So there may be some connection there. I also love when Lymond finds this out, he buries his face in his sheet, laughing noiselessly. And then again, he's laughing harder. And he describes, I love the way he describes France, my orchidaceous, rotten, fertile, maimed, beloved fool of a France. So I love this version of Lymond who is so like amused by everything. And I think also in addition to Tatty Boy being kind of like a fuck you to people, it's also like, I think he thinks it's just really funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, love him.
So yeah, and then he decides to take the wager. He's like, busy child, I think I shall just take that wager up. So they have 3 days to pass indoors, and so Stuart has been set, he's like, keep track of these guys. He's been set the task of paying attention to them. And he's like, is he getting suspicious of Tatty Boy? Because he says he's sitting down to analyze his performance. So he's paying attention. But it says after all his questions, it's hard to find out why to Mr. Bala inspiration seemed to come easily, and to Robin Stewart it came not at all. So he's focusing on Tatty Boy and is jealous, like you were saying, but also intrigued. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, and you know, we kind of saw earlier that he doesn't like himself, and he's longing for someone to guide him, and he sees this person that's like everything he's not and everything he wants to be.
Yeah.
And it's this mix of longing and resentment.
Yeah.
Also think there's a good description of him right before that. He arrayed his numberless ball and socket joints. And earlier we had him described as marionette-like. So he's this like really awkward, bony, like puppet-like person. Very different from Lymond.
So Michelle stops by and gets on super well with Liam Rowe, which
I love that.
makes sense.
Best
I mean,
immediately.
Well, and not just Michelle Harrison, but like a whole bunch of the people that he met there, those of a liberal or unorthodox turn of mind who were willing to risk royal displeasure. So he's brought all the Bohemians to the party, even though they're under house arrest.
and Liam Rowe and the sculptor took to one another.
No.
And I love that if the Irishman was surprised by his secretary's exploit, he did not show it because he probably wasn't that surprised.
No.
And it says he set the older men laughing so that Stuart was able to concentrate on Tatty Boy once again. So we get this idea that Robin is just really focused on the secretary. So yeah, the people all came. And we sort of get this like minor court set up almost is the description. So like a bunch of followers come and they start like gathering at this place, and it said by Monday a small court had sprung up. So they've gathered people around them.
I mean, Liam Rowe has this sort of mini celebrity about him now after the word of what happened at the tennis court has gotten around.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's like a curiosity to people in the area.
I think between Liam Rowe insulting the king and then Tatty Boy being the life of the party, people are interested in hanging out with them.
Who are these people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then Mistress Boyle and Una stop by.
Yeah.
What do you want to say about this scene?
Well, she says she feels terrible. She's been bothered out of her senses. She wishes she'd never sent the message. So we have her taking responsibility for the message. So that is a hint of maybe it wasn't all Una acting alone.
Maybe.
But of course she says that, total accident.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I am suspicious.
Definitely.
About all of it. Yeah.
And then Una shows up.
Yeah.
And I love their exchange.
Yeah.
So Una, she keeps like prodding at Tatty Boy. A man who helps hide printing presses might have to forfeit more than he bargained for.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, I know things about you.
Yeah. And then it's like for a moment he was quite still. So like she's a threat. I mean, he stops. Then he lifted his head. Una O'Dwyer, cold, hard wrought with unleashed storms and eaten with pride, look full into his eyes. Like, oh,
Yep.
She's kind of scary a little bit. Like, I don't know.
I'm suspicious.
And again, she keeps
Very.
like poking at him. She says, Tatty Boy Ballo, would you not expect the name Boy on a yellow-haired man? Which to me is like pretty much like, you are not who you say you are. She is, if she doesn't know, she's incredibly suspicious.
Well, and
Very.
she does it right after looking down on his bent head. So she's like inspecting his hair at the moment, which we find out was freshly dyed that morning. So there shouldn't be any gold showing through. But
Yeah. And she like, yeah, I wrote down like, does she know what's going on? And yeah, so then, I mean, Lymond tries to give sort of an answer about why. I'm guessing his name, Boy, would have something to do with, it seems to imply that having that name has something to do with being blonde.
Yeah, that's what she says.
Yeah.
He
So
says
the word,
he was born blonde and then his hair got dark when he got older.
which is what happened to me. I was born white blonde kid. So it definitely, also my family is part Irish. So
There you go, was the Irish part.
so there you go.
You and Tatty Boy are related, if only he was actually Irish.
If only he was Irish.
Lady D of Crawford.
No. So also okay, she made this reference that I did not get, and I looked for it in the first 2 chapters and I still didn't get it. So I have missed something and I don't know where I missed it. Where she says, women grow in the fields of France like turnips, which rude. Don't you care for them? Tatty Boy smiled, running the cards lightly through long fingers. Experiments have been a little restricted by the curfew. She washed his hands too, and said, she says, Lavuv at Depe will be sore to the heart. Won't you miss her down there on the Lore? Who is that?
Well, we don't know for sure, but I think what we're meant to assume by this is that Lavuv is a prostitute.
Right.
And that he's been visiting her, and Una knows he's been visiting her.
Okay, but that wasn't part of the chapters, right? This is the first we've heard of this person.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I scoured the first 2 chapters. I was like, where is this woman?
Well, so knowing Lymond, we know he gets his information from prostitutes, or at least we know he's from Molly. So sure. I would assume that this is one of his sources, and that she's saying, like, I know you're not really Tatty Boy, and I know you're a spy, and I know who your sources are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So she is definitely a threat.
And I know you've been concealing printing presses.
Yeah.
So I could have you dead in a heartbeat if I wanted.
She's got all this info. So, and I love Lymond's response to this, where it says, the cards dance without a pause. Behind them, amid the laughter and talk, Liam Rowe had become quiet. So he was paying attention to this conversation. Tatty Boy took his time. He dealt himself a hand, turned up a card, and drew one from the pack before he said, "No, a dear little neat soul like a pot of strawberries, would you say, but hard on the purse." And he paid no more attention. She turned on her heel. So she couldn't get the rise out of him that she wanted, and he just didn't give it to her. And so she just spins around and goes off, which, all right. So this is going to be the next day, the morning of Wednesday, is their last day in France.
So how is Lymond going to pull off staying in France?
Yeah. Also, it's interesting that, like, this last view that we get of Lymond in this chapter is that he has a dark, withdrawn face.
Yeah, what did you make of that?
He's not going into the next day confident of what's going to happen.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think Una rattled him too, because he knows, like, she's a threat, and it's going to be really hard for him to win this bet and stay in France.
Yeah. So they've got one more day. Is Lymond going to win his bet?
So real quick, here's that fan art that I skipped over before. Can you see it? This one? Which is them making the bet. I bet I can place myself within court by Thursday. I will take that bet because that is impossible. Which is by Prince of Pictou on Tumblr. I love that, like, we're seeing different fan artists for Queensplay than we saw for A Game of Kings, because, like, different fan artists linger on different books, and this person has done a bunch of Queensplay art because they like Liam Rowe, I guess. Yeah, it super amuses me. So how the hell is Lymond going to stay in France, you guys? What do you think's going to happen?
I don't know. He's stuck in the house.
I don't know, but he's going to figure it out, because this book we're not even done with the first chapter. So,
I mean, he doesn't have a lot of options. Like, the Dowager Queen literally said she kind of is taking him in his failure, so she doesn't seem to be wanting to rescue him. King of France doesn't seem to be an option. Hopefully Margaret Lennox is not an option. Like, maybe Tom Erskine and you know, the Jenny Fleming, Margaret Erskine situation might be useful in some way.
Something's going to happen at the entry. I think that his plan involves that. So, and I love that parallel, how the first part of this book ends with, like, this big sort of fair-like processional, where we see the parallel from the first book, where the first part ended with the Wappenshaw. Mm-hmm. So, like, I'm sort of seeing, like, this progression of events.
Mm-hmm. Misty, I love that.
Yeah.
All right, any more guesses or any final thoughts?
Well, I'm assuming all the chaos of the entry is going to be part of this. Like, there's elephants and, you know, floating fake whales and all of this crazy insanity of the procession and everything that the town is doing. That's got to be part of it. So how will he use this?
We'll find out.
All right. Then on that note, we will see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.